Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. The U.S. shows solidarity with Hong Kong's pro-democracy protesters by signing 2 bills to protect Hong Kongers' human rights. The legislation means that Hong Kong needs to maintain a level of self-governance or it may lose its special economic status with the U.S. The balloons almost walking on the ground, but the weather didn't stop them from flying at the 93rd annual Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The EU votes to increase U.S. beef imports. At the same time, the 28-nation bloc voted on a resolution urging the U.S. government to remove tariffs on certain products from EU member countries. A poll predicts Boris Johnson's party will win in upcoming UK elections. The key issue on voters' minds is Brexit, but there is still time for the opinions of the voting public to swing before December 12th. Yesterday, President Trump signed into law 2 human rights bills in support of protesters in Hong Kong. Various reactions are coming in. While Beijing says the maneuver is doomed to fail, pro-democracy advocate Joshua Wong calls it a remarkable achievement that shows the courage and determination of Hong Kongers.
Last week, both the Senate and House passed an act requiring annual review of Hong Kong's special trading relationship. It also paves the way for sanctions against Chinese and Hong Kong officials responsible for human rights violations in the city. The Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act means that the U.S. can change its trading relationship with Hong Kong if it is deemed not to be sufficiently autonomous. At present, Hong Kong receives favorable treatment over the mainland in matters of trade, investment, and immigration. For instance, the city isn't subject to the current U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports. Congress also passed a bill that would prohibit the export of control equipment to Hong Kong police in response to accusations that the force is using heavy-handed tactics. President Trump said in a statement that he signed these bills out of respect for President Xi, China, and the people of Hong Kong. Several U.S. senators have already spoken out to applaud the signing of the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. These excerpts are taken from statements issued on Wednesday. This new law could not be more timely in showing strong U.S. support for Hong Kongers' long-cherished freedoms. The Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act is an important step forward in holding the Chinese Communist Party accountable for its erosion of Hong Kong's autonomy and its repression of fundamental human rights. Signing this legislation into law ensures the United States finally sends a clear and unequivocal message to the people of Hong Kong: we are with you. Senator Ben Cardin said that the U.S. is not only watching, but now has strong legislative tools to back up our moral obligation to support Hong Kong. Whereas the Chinese Communist Party said it was determined to oppose input from the international community and warned it would take countermeasures. Pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong congratulated Hong Kongers on the signing of the bill, calling it a remarkable achievement.
People might ask, it is inviting foreign country interference in Hong Kong? And my comment is Hong Kong being recognized as the global city is a must for us to seek for international allies and international community to recognize the unique status of Hong Kong as the global financial center and the world city.
Hong Kong protesters hold a Thanksgiving rally to express gratitude to the U.S. for passing the Human Rights and Democracy Act, which was yesterday signed by President Trump.
The U.S. has taken in support of Hong Kong a step further and made it into legislation. This new tool gives the U.S. additional means to deter Beijing from interfering in Hong Kong's internal affairs.
U.S. flags were flying in Edinburgh Place Thursday evening. For the protesters, it's a celebration and a thank you note to the U.S. for passing 2 Hong Kong bills. They vowed to march on with their fight, now entering its 6th month.
Today is the Thanksgiving Day in the U.S., so I think we should use this opportunity to express our gratitude to the U.S. Congress and its citizens for supporting Hong Kong in the past few months. And of course, it is a good news that President Trump has signed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act this morning in Hong Kong time.
Rally organizer Ventus Lau urged the U.S. to swiftly implement the laws and penalize police and government officials who suppress democracy.
I also want other European countries, especially Germany and EU, to stand against China, because so far I don't think they stand firm against China. Yes, only I hope US can lead other countries to stand against China.
I expect the US government to really implement the causes of the act as soon as possible, including sanctioning those police officials and government officials who violated basic human rights in Hong Kong.
Chanting "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong," pro-democracy activists urge the rest of the world to follow the U.S.'s footsteps in supporting human rights in Hong Kong.
As House Democrats wrapped up the public impeachment hearings last week, Senate Republicans have sent the latest round of records requests as part of a growing inquiry into former Vice President Joe Biden's dealings with the Ukrainian gas firm Burisma Holdings. The energy company hired Joe Biden's son Hunter while his father was serving under President Obama. Senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson wrote to the National Archives requesting records of January 2016 White House meetings with senior Ukrainian officials. According to investigative reporter John Solomon, Ukrainian officials who attended the White House meeting were encouraged to halt an investigation into Burisma. Senator Lindsey Graham also requested records from the State Department regarding 2016 communications between Biden, then Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, and their respective offices. All three Senate Republicans have described the requests as an investigation. And yesterday, the U.S. rejected a suggestion that it should pursue a prisoner swap involving a former U.S. Marine jailed in Russia over spying allegations. The U.S. instead reiterated its stance, calling for his immediate release.
Earlier this month, former U.S. Marine Corps officer Paul Whelan's Russian lawyer urged the U.S. and other countries to push for a prisoner swap with Moscow. He argued that an exchange could get his client released. But Julie Fisher, the chargée d'affaires at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, dismissed the idea Wednesday.
We are calling for his release because no evidence has been brought forward and he has been imprisoned for 11 months. There is no need to discuss a swap, particularly for someone who was a convicted criminal who pled guilty.
Whelan was detained by agents from Russia's Federal Security Service in a Moscow hotel room on December 28th last year. Moscow says Whelan was caught with a flash drive containing classified information, but he says a Russian acquaintance gave him the drive, which he thought contained holiday photos. A U.S. diplomat visited Whelan in jail on Wednesday. Not long after, the U.S. Embassy complained about Whelan's declining health. The department called Russia's treatment of him shameful, adding that Moscow refused to allow the diplomat to bring him Thanksgiving dinner. Whelan has been held in pretrial detention for 11 months while investigators look into his case. He has not been allowed to call his family during that time.
Each year, more than 3.5 million people in New York City and over 50 million people at home watch the annual Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. This year, the strong winds didn't stop the giant balloons from floating. NTD Xu Rong reports.
The wind is not helping, but it won't stop them flying. It's what people come here for.
I'm excited to see all the floats. And then you just see it come near you and you're just like, hi, hi, hi!
Not without its challenges. With the cheering of the people, the balloons made it through.
They're like working so hard to carry the floats because of the wind, and they're doing such a good job.
The 93rd Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade attracted people from all over the world.
Ready for this year? We're happy the balloons are flying, is what we heard, so that's always good.
This is a dream come true. It's beautiful. It's amazing.
People started waiting from 5:30 a.m. For some, this is the first time. For others, it's a family tradition.
Years. How many years? 30, 25, 30 years, yeah. 30 years. So how many generations do I see here? Three generations.
The rain and cold weather doesn't stop them, and the wind won't either.
We love it. We love it. We wouldn't miss it.
Even though the weather is like...
Oh, it's fun. This is good.
This
year. Last year it was 22 degrees. This is like having a parade in summertime.
It isn't particularly about the parade or the float. It's a day of happiness and gratitude.
It's just being here with my daughter. It's the best thing ever. This is the greatest Thanksgiving ever. A nice time to spend with our family, and it's making great memories and just really enjoying being a New Yorker because we have the most amazing Thanksgiving in New York.
Happy Thanksgiving!
Reporting by Xu Rong, NTD News.
European lawmakers have approved an increase in U.S. beef imports to the European Union today, but they are criticizing the Trump administration for imposing tariffs on metal imports, as well as threatening to target EU cars.
Lawmakers of the European Parliament voted in favor of a plan to allow U.S. farmers a larger share of an existing 45,000-ton quota from 2020. The vote came alongside a resolution urging the removal of tariffs imposed by President Trump on EU steel and aluminum. The motion also pushed Trump to withdraw his threat to raise tariffs on EU cars and car parts. The agreement on beef is designed to settle a dispute that dates back to 1981, when the EU banned the use of growth hormones in meat across the 28-nation bloc. The ban also extended to imported meat. The EU and the US eventually established an agreement in 2009 to grant a quota for hormone-free beef imports, which currently stands at 45,000 tons.
Border officials busted a driver trying to smuggle contraband in from Mexico. That contraband, Bologna. Officials questioned a man at a crossing in El Paso after noticing red rolls behind his seat. Apparently, the man knew he wasn't allowed to bring in products containing pork because he lied and said it was turkey ham. That would have been allowed, but pork is forbidden because it can introduce disease to the domestic pork industry. The suspect obviously wasn't transporting the meat just for personal consumption. Officers seized 14 rolls of it, weighing 154 pounds. A press release from the Customs and Border Protection Office says the Mexican bologna was then destroyed, though it's not exactly clear how. As for the driver, they let him go. So he's got something to be thankful for this Thanksgiving. Today, U.S. Special Representative to Venezuela Elliot Abrams said he expects the U.S. to keep putting diplomatic and economic pressure on Venezuela's regime.
Abrams spoke at the State Department and said that members of the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro's regime are stealing. He added that hundreds of millions of dollars went to no-bid or overvalued contracts, which the Treasury Department called profiting from starvation.
The regime steals more and more money. In July, the Treasury Department sanctioned 3 stepsons of Nicolas Maduro for stealing money from the program that provides food for the poorest Venezuelans.
He also explained that the U.S. is pushing for travel restrictions and visa denials against several dozen Maduro regime officials.
What is next is, I would say, a continuation of the current policy. We think we have the right policy. We are confident we have the support of the Venezuelan people.
On December 3rd, countries that ratified the Inter-American Rio Treaty are scheduled to meet in Bogota, Colombia. During the summit, they are expected to decide whether or not to implement the travel restrictions against the regime.
A new poll has predicted that British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's party will win a December 12th election, but they say there's still time for things to change.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is on course for victory in a December 12th election, with a majority of 68. That's according to YouGov, the pollsters who predicted the last election results in 2017. They foresaw then Premier Theresa May losing her majority, when most predicted a big win. If Johnson does win, Brexit could be imminent. He's promised to take Britain out of the European Union by January the 31st. And the poll results show it's all about Brexit, Britain's most divisive issue and the cause of political crisis after crisis. Johnson's Conservatives stand to gain 47 seats, according to the poll, with the bulk of the swing in areas that voted to leave in the 2016 referendum. And at the expense of Jeremy Corbyn's opposition Labour Party, which now backs a second referendum on EU membership, versus Johnson's promise to get Brexit done. Sterling shot up when the poll was published, jumping 0.5 cent within minutes. The YouGov model crunches data from more than 100,000 interviews over 7 days, along with demographics and national statistics. It also takes into account specific circumstances in each constituency to predict results for every single seat. Labour is on track to secure only 211 seats out of 650, which would be its worst result since the 1980s. But YouGov also said there was plenty of time for people to change their minds before Britain's first Christmas election in nearly a century.
The leader of the UK's opposition Labour Party showing 451 pages of what he calls evidence that Britain's beloved National Health Service is on the table in trade talks with the US.
In a dramatic twist to the UK's election race, the leader of the opposition Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, on Wednesday brandished hundreds of pages of what he described as evidence.
451 pages.
That the UK's beloved National Health Service is being discussed in trade talks with the United States.
We're talking here about secret talks for a deal with Donald Trump after Brexit, a deal that will shape our country's future. These reports pull back on the curtain of the secrecy that's been plotted for all of us behind closed doors by this Conservative government.
The NHS has become a key battleground in the December 12th election, which Prime Minister Boris Johnson called in a bid to break an impasse over Brexit.
I'm really struggling at the moment.
Corbyn has repeatedly accused Johnson of preparing to sell off the NHS, citing, for example, the US president.
So NHS or anything else, or a lot more than that, but everything will be on the table, absolutely.
The leaked documents cover trade discussions over a period from mid-2017 until early July this year, just before Johnson took power. Labour said it was alarmed that US officials appear to be pushing for longer patents on medicines, something that Corbyn said would make drugs more expensive for the NHS.
These uncensored documents leave Boris Johnson's denials in absolute tatters.
On Wednesday, Johnson dismissed the evidence, saying Corbyn was trying to divert attention from criticism on Tuesday that he had failed to stem the tide of anti-Semitism within his party.
We are absolutely resolved that there will be no sale of the NHS, no privatisation. The NHS is not on the table in any way.
Polling data released on Tuesday suggested that Labour had cut the Conservatives' lead to 11 points.
Up next, rescuers are still searching for survivors after Tuesday's earthquake in Albania. The 6.4 magnitude quake was followed by hundreds of aftershocks. The destruction forced many Albanians to seek shelter in tents. Find out what the government promises for survivors and more when we return.
I have traveled all over the world to 50 countries now, and I have never seen a production any better than this, anywhere.
It's absolutely out of this world.
It's blown away my expectations.
It was just a superior performance that truly could bridge the world through music and dance.
Startling and breathtaking. We haven't had quite an experience like that in all the years that I've lived here, so it was special for us.
I think that I learned more in this performance than I actually do in a whole week of school.
The beautiful costumes and people just float. The choreography is incredible and the storyline, beautiful, beautiful.
It's so beautiful. I'm getting teary-eyed watching. It's very moving. You feel it. You're feeling the show.
It's like a mini vacation that transported me into another place, into another world, into another culture.
When I came here tonight, I felt very dejected about the human race, about everything going on in this world. And during the performance, I just felt now there was hope for each of us individually, as well as for all of us collectively.
Shenyun was more breathtaking, more heart-wrenchingly beautiful, more amazing than I had expected. It's very difficult to put into words, actually. You just have to come see it.
Rescue teams desperately seeking survivors under rubble in Albania's western town of Boris. They're looking for survivors and bodies trapped under the rubble 2 days after a 6.4 magnitude quake killed at least 40 people.
This young boy was trapped under rubble after Albania's powerful quake. He screamed out as several people tried to comfort him, while others used their bare hands to dig up the debris that was trapping him. Entire families were buried under their homes after Tuesday's deadly quake left a trail of destruction. Drone footage released by the fire brigade showed the extensive damage that's been done. Hundreds of aftershocks have been felt as the death toll continues to climb. Forecast rain could begin to hamper rescue efforts, while hundreds of displaced people are now sleeping in tents. The Prime Minister has announced that Albanians who lost their homes will be put up in hotels over winter and promised new housing in 2020. International rescuers are now on hand, still searching for survivors, hoping that the people still missing might have survived days after the quake.
Israel's army demolished the houses of 4 Palestinian people today. It said the houses belonged to attackers suspected of carrying out a deadly stabbing of a teen soldier.
Israeli forces tore down the homes in a West Bank village northwest of Hebron. Israel said the 4 are suspected of being involved in the fatal stabbing of an off-duty soldier back in August.
They got us out of the house, and they took me to my son's house. And after that, they surrounded the area and installed a curfew. Then they demolished the house.
This man is the father of one of the suspected militants. He said he and his 10 children were now homeless. Israel says it carries out home demolitions as a deterrent against future Palestinian attackers.
Up next, the second attack in the span of a month on an Iranian consulate in Iraq. The violent aftermath involved shootings and blocked roads. Iraqi forces have already shot and killed 14 protesters. Find out more when we return.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
In China, something can be illegal, but still in common practice. For example, bribery, or intellectual property theft, or Uber.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people and counting. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? It's starring me.
It's more and more obvious that China is having a major influence on the U.S.
Hey, have you heard of China Uncensored? 中国揭秘.
In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the only show on TV or the internet. It will be the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Have you heard of China Uncensored?
Yeah, I have.
You actually have? He's heard of China Uncensored.
I love China Uncensored.
Iraqi protesters burned tires and blocked roads today, one day after setting fire to an Iranian consulate. In another city, medical sources say Iraqi security forces shot dead 14 protesters.
Demonstrations reached a new level of violence late on Wednesday. Protesters stormed and torched the Iranian consulate in an attack aimed at the downfall of their Iranian-backed government. A curfew was also imposed in the area following the incident. The demonstrators said that they would continue to protest and threaten to block roads between Najaf and other provinces until their demands are met. This is the second attack on an Iranian consulate in Iraq this month. According to medical sources, Iraqi security forces shot dead 14 protesters in the southern city of Nasiriyah on Thursday. Iraqis have taken to the streets in the thousands over recent weeks to demand the departure of their government and political class. They view the system as corrupt and backed by foreign powers, particularly neighboring Iran.
The Taiwanese government has begun a renewed push for an anti-infiltration law. The law would prevent outside efforts to influence politics and the democracy of Taiwan. The move comes after recent revelations of planned election interference by a supposed former Chinese spy.
Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council spokesman said on Thursday that China was using Taiwan's free and open environment to create division within society.
We are right at the front line of external threats, and thus have an even more urgent need to strengthen the legal system to safeguard national security and the future of freedom and democracy.
Recently, Australian news reported on Chinese national Wang Li Chang, who said he was a former spy. He said he had been given assignments to interfere in Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement and Taiwan's upcoming elections. The China-friendly Kuomintang opposition party in Taiwan has dismissed Wang's claims. The bill is being pushed forward ahead of the presidential elections in January.
Up next, South Korea is zeroing in on cyberbullying with renewed force following the death of 2 Korean idols in November. One counselor says many people don't realize how serious malicious comments are and how similar they are to murder. Hear more about that. Hear more about what police and parliament are doing to combat the epidemic when we return.
Every once in a while, something comes along, so masterful, it leaves you in awe. So inspiring, it changes your life. So beautiful, you wish it would never end. When that happens, it's something not to be missed. Shen Yun, an all-new production every year.
Renewed focus is emerging in South Korea on the effects of cyberbullying after the apparent suicide of a second K-pop artist in the span of 1 month.
K-pop singer Gu Hara was found dead in her home in Seoul on Sunday. The police found a handwritten note offering a bleak and hopeless description of her life. She was 28.
한국 내에서는 그 일반 사람의
In South Korea, celebrities live off people's attention. So usually they drop the charges and people start thinking, hey, we don't actually get punished.
Gu had previously spoken out against cyberbullying. In May, she had been found unconscious at her home and hospitalized. A month after the incident, she admitted to suffering depression and vowed to fight malicious online comments. But South Korea is fighting back. Member of Parliament Park Sun-suk has proposed a bill to make it possible for anyone to ask web portals to take down malicious or blatantly false comments. The law I am proposing defines hate discrimination as illegal information and allows anyone, not just the victim, to request comments be taken down. As a former presidential spokeswoman, she first addressed the issue of online attacks in 1998.
Normally, when you are injured from physical violence, you can go to a hospital to get treated and recover. But online violence is a bigger problem because it can't be treated that way and can sometimes even lead to death.
The police consider cyber violence a serious crime. Officials have established an active program to educate the public on how not to fall prey to online attacks or become the perpetrator.
And that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer.